Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have a special guest, Janice Pica-Scholl. Janice, you are the career coach and you lived in Asia for 5 years. I know that you support ladies or females to develop their careers abroad or in US right now when you are currently living. So welcome.
Thank you for
Welcome
having me.
on board. And the first question will be about the reason that you decide to move abroad. Like, what was the reason that you decide one day, yeah, I'm going somewhere else?
So, my husband and I had decided before we had kids that we wanted to give our kids the opportunity to learn different places and different cultures and really understand that, your opportunity goes beyond the borders of your native country. And so that was something that we had intended. If we had the opportunity, we would take advantage of. So when we had kids, our firstborn, it made it a little bit challenging. So we had the opportunity and we didn't take it. And it was really scary because it was important to us, but the timing wasn't right with our firstborn. And we had an opportunity come up when our second child was born. So our first was about 4, and then our second child was about 6, 7 months old when we left the US. And we thought that it was such a great opportunity with our kids at that age to expose them to the world. And, my husband and I had lived within a half an hour of our parents our whole lives until we moved to Asia. And so it was a major change for all of us, but it was an incredible experience. And we're so glad that we did it.
And the second question will be how because when you left the American bubble, what kind of experience did you have, and what kind of experience you had when you came back inside of the bubble that you left?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Big changes to both. When we left the US, we're from the Midwest, and so we get a lot of snow. We have heavy winters, and our first destination was Singapore. So we left, and there was feet of snow on the ground, and we entered Singapore, and it's basically the tropics, and concrete. We were in a more rural area, more suburban area before that. So really everything overnight changed. I remember just being in the airport with these 2 little kids, and it took us, 30 travel hours to get there. Baby strapped on me, lots of luggage, and I could just feel the heat coming from the outside as we walked to the doors of the exit of the airport. And it was like, it literally, I could feel the heat and the humidity in the air, and it like literally hit me. Oh my gosh, this is a phenomenal change. And it really was. I was very nervous. I'm a cautious person. And I'm definitely an introvert. So I was really nervous about my ability to adapt. And I surprised myself, which is one reason why I really advocate that people try. And if they're considering a move abroad, do it, because it really allowed me to try new things and explore, the limits of what I was or wasn't comfortable with that I never would have experienced before. So it was hard. I don't want to pretend that it wasn't, but it also gave me opportunity to kind of embrace new things that I don't believe I ever would have had the opportunity to do before. And Singapore is a very welcoming place. There are people from every country, I think, in Singapore. And so the diversity is great. So it was so exciting every day to meet new people and learn new things. And then Singapore as a culture knows that there's so many people from different places in the world. So they make it really easy for you to adapt. For us, of course, firstly was everything's in Mandarin and English. So English was super easy for us there. Our next country, not so easy, when we were in Japan. But so first we had English, and then Singapore posts the rules. There are certain cultural expectations even that they post in the train stations and things like that to help you know what to do as a member of a new society. And so that was a really, really great place for us to kind of learn how to live in a different place. our second country was Japan, and that is a very deep and rich culture. And I think the mindset of just accepting that I would make errors culturally and in learning the country was really important for me, because you don't know everything that you should or shouldn't do. We were louder than the Japanese. It was, when we first got to Japan, the thing that I noticed was the silence. It was just so quiet, and we were this loud American family. So, very, very different experience, but just being patient with myself and understanding that we would make mistakes and that we would try to do our best, gave me the grace to myself to learn and adapt.
Oh, it's very, it's very good point that you mention it, because sometimes I think that we make these mistakes when we are moving abroad and we are building our life on the side, just because we are afraid that we will make some mistake when we will be speaking in the language that we don't know, or that some kind of the faux pas in culture way. So it's I think. We have in the UK we have a quite big Polish community, and some of them, they are living in the particular areas of the big cities. They are going to the Polish shop, or they are going to the factory when they are working with some other Polish people, and they don't absorb the culture that they are surrounded by. And I remember my first impression when I went, I have been in Japan in 2018, and I remember when I landed there, it was in Okinawa, and I remember my first impression, because I am mom of two, that it was some kind of the sense of safetyness, like, wow, I would like to be here and I would like to raise my kids here. I'm not sure. Do you have the same?
Yes. And the safety, the safetyness for living abroad. And we came from the US, where it did feel, like you said, our bubble, it felt like a bubble, and we knew what was safe and what wasn't safe. And moving abroad, some people were really nervous of, well, you're going to live in a foreign country. How do you know it's safe? But Japan is such an incredibly safe place. If I were to meet a friend in Tokyo for dinner and we lived outside the city, and I was coming home at night by myself on the train, and part of my commute home would be walking by myself at night, I never felt afraid. It felt like a very safe place, and we found it. Our experience was, it was a very safe place. It was a place where people were willing to help you. And even if we had language barriers, we had an experience where our family was waiting at the train station for a train, and we thought we knew we were getting on the right train, but we weren't. And someone kind of recognized where we were probably going. We had that like newness look, and they said, no, you want to wait. Don't get on this train. Get on the next train. We know that you're going. We know where you want to go. And they helped us, even though they couldn't communicate in English and we didn't understand in Japanese. They were able to help us, and they approached us to do that. So to be in a culture where people were so kind of calm and peaceful and willing to help you, it felt very safe for us. Absolutely.
So we have to be really aware which country would we like to choose to live, because it's totally different experience. And as probably we all know, Japan is quite a good country to move anyway. The way how they manage COVID-19, even in Asia, at Taiwan, almost, I don't know, few hundreds days without even one COVID case. And it's a lot of opinion that the future is in Asia anyway. And do you have any plans to come back there and build your life again somewhere else?
We've been back in the US for a couple of years, and you did ask a little bit about repatriation or moving back to our home country, and I didn't mention that yet, but my husband and I joke, well, we could always go back. We could always go back because we did love Japan. I think that it fit our philosophies very well, and we loved the culture. We loved the deep history. comparing it to the history of the US, Japan is, thousands and thousands of years in the making. We don't have anything like this in the US. So there's so much. So we talk about going back at some point. I don't know, because of all of the changes with COVID and depending on jobs and things like that, we would definitely like to. I think it would be a really peaceful and nice place to live in our older years. It's also a fabulous place for older kids because kids are given, because it's a safe place and you have public transport, the kids are given a lot of independence. And so many kids really enjoy having their late teenage, early college years there. So definitely, we would love to go back.
Do you have any, because I think that it's some kind, maybe not excuses, but some of the moms are really, if I will be single, maybe, but because of my family, it will be hard to move. They are afraid about the kids, how they will find themselves abroad. Do you have any advice or suggestion, how to overcome this?
Yeah. And so one of our children has life-threatening food allergies. And so before we left the US, have always been cautious because we have to be for her safety. And that was really a concern that we had before we agreed to move overseas, was making sure that we had access to the medical care we would need in the event of an emergency, and that we could feed her and still enjoy the culture. And so I wanted to mention that because not only did we just have young children, which made it challenging, we also had this medical concern that was an extra layer of question to us of whether or not we could do it. And I just want to tell everyone that, the stories we tell ourselves about what we can and can't do are not necessarily the reality of what we experience. And so when you go and you try something that you think, maybe I don't know if I can handle this, can't do this, and you do it, it's so empowering. So that is the first thing I want to tell you. With our daughter, we talked to her pediatric allergist because we wanted to say, do you think we can live in Asia? And he happened to be from India and he was familiar with Singapore. And I said, can we do this? And he said, absolutely. It will be the best experience for your family. You will bond so much. You will learn so much culturally. Do it. And so for this person who I thought was going to say, oh, I don't know, maybe there's some questions because there's a lot of peanuts, for instance, in Singapore, for him to say, no, do it. It was really important to me to hear that. And he had done it with his young kids. I think, you don't do it because it's going to be a challenge with children, but the reasons to do it are your family bonds so much more because of the closeness. Like we're a family of four. Our family of four are the only four people who have lived our life, that have had this experience. And so it has given us so much more than the challenge of figuring out how to buy new diapers or figuring out how to do things a different way with young children.
And even if your kids are still, they are still small or young, do you think that the part of the culture that they learn about, they kept inside of them for the future?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it showed as we went into COVID-19, because, my kids understand that we just sometimes do things differently. And there might be a variety of reasons. So I think that they look at the world differently. First of all, they don't approach people who may look different or speak a different language as something to be apprehensive about. It's someone to learn from. So I think that's first. Second of all, I think that they understand that sometimes the rules change. And so with COVID, the rules changed overnight. And it's very hard to adapt to the limitations that we have today and the changes in structure. But our kids have done that. And so, another mom of a young child overseas had said, we don't read books to our children when they're young in hopes that they remember the stories. Maybe they will, but we do that because we hope that it will help them learn to develop a love of reading later on. And so I really thought of it from that perspective. We may not have a son because he came back to the US when he was turning 5. He's not going to remember a lot of the actual day-to-day experiences of overseas, but he does look at the world differently, and we can see that in him because of his experience abroad.
It's very interesting what you are saying, and I think that our audience can be really curious about the relationship. You know, when you move abroad and you don't know anybody, how you can build the relationship and create some network around you.
Yeah. So it's really hard, right? and I think every person experiences it so differently. I mentioned I'm an introvert, so this was a very big concern of mine because I don't like to put myself out there. And you mentioned that, you know, for instance, there's a large Polish community where you live, and in Japan, there's not a giant American community, but the Americans and the native English speakers are often kind of in one area because we might be going to the international school that's English, things like that. So, you know, what I would say is you need to get out of your bubble, but you need to do so in a way that's comfortable, and look at everything that you do as an adventure and be willing to share. I think the best thing you can do is start to learn and then start to mentor someone who is behind you, that is coming into the country. And you don't have to be an established person to learn a lot quickly, right? We have to learn how to handle the grocery store, how to navigate the garbage, you know, these little everyday occurrences. You quickly can become a mentor to someone else. And that really helped me develop relationships with people. So step out of your bubble, but stay in it when you need to. Meet other people from your culture if that's going to give you some comfort. And I do think that having someone who can understand the questions the way you have them, you know, every American family that I know that went to Japan felt loud. And I think we were loud. We are much louder than the Japanese. So talking to an American friend about that, and then laughing about the stories of, you know, being in a restaurant and our loud kids or something, it makes you feel better because you know you're not alone. The mentoring, I had only been in our country for a year, and through my children's school, they asked me to mentor a couple of families. And I'm like, but I've just gotten here. And they're like, you're going to be okay. And that was such a good experience because it just brings you bond over the challenges. And so if you experience challenges with people, or if you are honest with people about the challenges, you can really develop close relationships. And the benefit of that, I think, is that you bond it with your friends in expat life so much quicker than you do in your home country. So coming back to the US, I find it very challenging to make friends because it's a very different lifestyle. And the things I talk about with people are different than what I talked about when we were abroad. You just have the opportunity for a lot of depth. So the people who are introverts or maybe are apprehensive to put themselves out there, I would say the quality of the connections that you can get living abroad are so phenomenal that it is well worth putting yourself out there a little bit.
Definitely agree. I think that from my point of when we moved here to the UK, my husband started to work for the company, which was the French one. So we had a lot of friends from France, and I think that because we shared the same experience to be abroad, to be expats, I think that it was link us, connect us much more, and very soon the friends or the people that I don't know, I met 1 year ago became my family, that I shared with them my success and my failures, and I call them, to ask about advice, even if it was only 12 months that we met,
Yes.
so
Yes.
mm,
I think it's like 1 month is like 1 year, in the way that
yeah,
you develop a relationship overseas,
yeah.
because the bonding is so much more intense.
Yeah. In terms, Janice, in terms of career, have you managed to to develop your career abroad? Like,
So when we moved to Singapore,
mhm,
I had intended, we went for my husband's job. So that
mhm,
was the opportunity that presented itself, was through
mhm,
his job. I decided to take a break from my career at that
mhm,
time. But then something came up. I had a great opportunity come up when we were overseas. So I did take one corporate, I was in banking before, and then I went into commercial finance when I was in Singapore.
mhm, mhm,
And then when I moved to Japan, I took a more traditional career break,
mhm,
which was I stopped working and was just the trailing spouse who
mhm,
was with her significant other who was working, but then I was not.
mhm,
The language barrier in Japan was significant.
mhm,
And then with the kids' ages that we had, it was more challenging than I would want to do there. So
mhm,
I was able to adapt my career in Singapore
mhm,
because I again looked at it as an opportunity to learn. And
mhm,
so I focused heavily on when I was getting the job, to be able to get the job and be recruited. I focused a lot on how my skills that I had from the US were
mhm,
transferable to
mhm,
what they were looking for.
mhm,
And I had a lot of success. When I
mhm,
came back to the US, I also looked for a traditional corporate job like I had left and had success, but I decided not to take it.
mhm,
So, what I did in Japan, though, was I found that there were many of us spouses who had left great careers.
mhm,
And we were all nervous about what would happen when we moved back home, for those of us who had a certain time that we would be abroad, because we didn't leave our careers because we were unhappy or unsatisfied with them. We left because logistics. We couldn't do it in a different
mhm,
country.
mhm,
So there were many people who were doctors, lawyers, scientists. Like, I met people from all different kinds of professions, that had thriving careers, that were walking around really nervous about, how am I going to reintegrate, not into just my life when I get back to my home country, but my career? And
mhm,
will I lose all of that? So now what I do is I work with women primarily,
mhm,
primarily mothers, and
mhm,
help them navigate these career breaks, which
mhm,
often result in career changes, which adds
mhm,
another layer of complexity. But
mhm,
so I just found that there are so many things that we can be doing during our career breaks that
mhm,
can help us when we do feel it's time to return. And
mhm,
I really love helping women figure that out,
mhm,
instead of having that sense of fear that they will
mhm.
lose what they have built.
Janice, I just want to mention that the link to your website, it will be below our podcast. So if somebody is listening us and want to ask you about the help, support, or advice, they can very easily connect with you. And I think that it sounds like, when you are going abroad, and even if it's a huge language barrier, or the country where it's really, really difficult to find the job, it doesn't have to be the waste of time or the big gap or your career, because probably you can invest this time in some kind of the self-development or other ways that you can use in the future when you will need it.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are so, like, for many of us in our home countries, when we're
Mhm,
working, there's not enough time to invest in a change or more depth into what we're learning. And so when we are abroad today, there are so many opportunities to learn, whether it's remotely or it's
mhm,
in the country that we're located in. So language barrier isn't just a barrier. It's also an opportunity for you to really focus on what you want to do.
mhm,
There are so many opportunities for strategic volunteering if you
Mhm.
want to try new things but are
Mhm.
unsure if that's what's right for you. There are
Mhm.
opportunities for education. There are
Mhm.
so many ways that you can invest in yourself,
Mhm.
and you can also continue to really focus on keeping the relationships that you've built in your home country. I
Mhm.
think a lot of us feel like, well, we've left and we aren't working. And so we don't know how to remain in contact with those that we left in our old careers. But anyone who is starting over in a new country, please keep those relationships going,
Mhm.
because the world is small. I think we all learn that as we move around. The world is very small, and you don't know when you will be in contact or will be looking for a different role, and those people will be helpful to you. And many people are very interested in hearing about your life and your changes abroad. So it's really easier to keep those connections because you always have something to talk about. There's always a funny story that you can share about the cultural differences that you've experienced and how you learned something the hard way, or whatever it is that you want to share. You'll always have a topic to talk about with the people back in your native country.
Mhm. Especially with the social media platform like LinkedIn, probably it's
Mhm.
not so difficult, right now to keep the relationship with your previous network. And you mentioned something that you will always have some topic to speak about, to share. And I thought that in the terms of career, even to being abroad is some kind of the uniqueness
Mhm.
in some kind of the areas that you can transfer it as your strength, your skill, when you can find yourself very easily in multicultural environment in the middle of Asia. So it is some kind of the story about you already, even if you didn't work there.
Exactly. What we are learning more and more every day is that flexibility and empathy are the most important things that you can bring to any job, any career. And when you are able to adapt to new cultures and you are
Mhm.
flexible with the changes that
Mhm.
life
Mhm.
presents you, it's demonstrating that you
Mhm.
have a capacity to do that for a future employer.
Mhm.
And making sure that you remind yourself that you've accomplished something just by navigating a move abroad. Another
Mhm.
thing I recommend people do is to keep track of the small wins that you have when you're overseas. It's easy to
Mhm.
forget how, learning how to navigate the cultural norms in a different country, it will become natural to you at some point.
Mhm.
But when you go back home, it's hard for you to articulate that to someone in a business setting if you haven't thought about it in a career perspective. So write it down. Write
Mhm.
down a personal experience that you had where it was really hard and how you had to prepare and make sure that you were sensitive to the differences of the people you were meeting with, for instance. It can be within your children's school. It can be if you are working abroad. It can be just with friends. Just navigating those differences and demonstrating the flexibility
Mhm.
is really important.
It sounds like a future skills and also like strategic thinking, like like in the current situation with COVID and in this 21st century. For me, it's really I'm really thinking about the skills and the direction that I should take just to secure myself for the future. Like sometimes even if something is really um, very attract me right now because for example of amount of money or the higher salary, but when I think a little bit deeper about it and I know that it will not take me to the point where I want to be after 5 years and will not give me this, for example, flexibility or I will not be in the multicultural environment, or I will not develop, I don't know, my IT skills. It's something that I don't want to take. I don't want to accept, even if today it can be quite, wealthy offer. So yeah, it's all about the strategy and next steps that you have to plan for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in strategy, you have to convince someone when you're looking for a job in the future to understand how what you chose to do made sense. So what I mean by that is you may take a job that will teach you IT, it but you might have to explain how that fits into the big picture of where you wanted to go to a future employer. You have to be able to convince them that here's why this skill set, coupled with all of the experience that you've had outside of that new skill set, is going to allow you to be successful. And no one can tell a better story about you than you. So having a strategy, following that strategy, not getting kind of persuaded by the shiny lights or the more money sometimes is definitely important. And then also understanding how to tell that story to someone who has not lived perhaps your multicultural life, has not experienced all of the things that you have. You have to really learn how to articulate that in words.
Thank you, Janice. So much for this conversation. You gave us a lot of very useful and practical tips to use if we think about moving abroad or we are currently living abroad. So thank you for being here with us. And
it was so good to be here.
And hopefully it will not be the last session with you, the last podcast, and we can record the part 2 if we collect the new questions from our audience. So thanks for today, and hopefully to speak to you soon.
Absolutely, I would love to.
Bye.
Bye-bye.